Now let's move to other matters whereby, like other sectors in the country, the education sector suffered major disruptions in the year 2020 due to the coronavirus pandemic. Schools across the country were closed for months, with a partial reopening done much later in the year. The closure of schools in the country has had major adverse effects on stakeholders in the sector. Reporter Caroline Kamau takes a look back at the unprecedented impact of COVID-19 in the education sector and the preparedness of schools as the country looks forward to the full reopening and resumption of face-to-face learning in Kenyan schools, which actually is on Monday next week.
We have suspended learning in all our education institutions with immediate effect. Consequently, and to facilitate a phased approach, primary and secondary day schools are to suspend operations from tomorrow.
On the 15th of March, just 3 days after Kenya confirmed its first COVID-19 case, President Uhuru Kenyatta directed the immediate closure of all schools in the country, among a raft of measures to curb the spread of the virus. With that directive by the president, these classes remained empty for 6 months straight until the partial reopening of schools in October. This may well be the most disruptive phenomenon education has suffered in history. Millions of school-going children from basic to tertiary level were sent home as schools, given their dense population, could portend a catastrophe should coronavirus sit there. The few lucky students were, however, able to continue with learning, albeit virtually. But for the biggest population, online learning was not an option.
Sikuanga na feel comfortable kukaa home sana, na saizi sihisi poa venye tuko home. Nataka kurudi shule na hatujakuwa tukikuwa na online classes ama kutumiwa papers tunafanya. Mimi naweza taka shule zikirudiwa, Mungu asaidie zisikafungue tena juu ya coronavirus.
And for once, COVID-19 pandemic invalidated the theory that education is the biggest equalizer, laying bare the inequalities that exist between the middle class and the poor. Even worse was the reality that the pandemic reversed decades of progress made in ensuring every child gets an education. Academic disengagement is not the only challenge the children of this generation have suffered in the last few months. A school environment is a place where children socialize with their peers, develop physically and emotionally, and for many, schools have offered a safe haven from certain cultural and social malfunctions. Away from that restricted environment, children were prone to sexual, physical, and emotional abuse. Though the government is yet to give actual numbers of girls who got pregnant during this period, conservative data has put the numbers in their thousands. Beyond the statistics, the cumulative effect of teenage pregnancy is perpetuating the cycle of poverty, which consequently lowers the individual's social and economic development.
Since we started, we have around more than 35 cases identified for child abuse, which all the cases have been reported to the police. They have OB numbers. Unfortunately, only a few have been able to get attention when it comes to perpetrators get arrested and legal action taking place. But most of the cases ziko pending, perpetrators hawajakuwa arrested.
With no financing from government and with private schools depending purely on school fees to manage their institutions, prolonged closure of schools presented a huge challenge to the sector.
Private schools do not depend on government funds in any way whatsoever. They depend on school fees that is paid for by parents when learners are in school. And therefore, in the absence of learners in school, private schools have had to devise other ways to get income to be able to support some of the programs that have to run, whether children are in session or not. At the moment, because of the effects of COVID-19, we've had 331 private schools across the country that have decided to shut down completely, not to reopen again, because they are unable to invest in the required management infrastructure to be ready for reopening.
Peter Ndoro, the Kenya Private Schools Association chairman, says the government has not fulfilled its pledge to give schools concessionary loans to cushion them against the effects of COVID-19.
We have been engaging the government in a number of discussions to find out ways and means through which the government can support the private sector to be able to survive and continue expanding access to quality education for the Kenyan children because of the great role that they play in supporting the government in regards to the provision of quality education in our country. The discussion has led to a promise for a 7 billion stimulus package, which as we speak today remains a promise. It has not been delivered.
So what happens to the thousands of teachers and non-teaching staff whose schools were closed during the pandemic? What will become of the 55,600 affected students? With the government having announced a full resumption of physical learning in January, questions of compliance to the Ministry of Health safety protocols have emerged. At the Hospital Hill Primary School, adequate measures have been put in place to ensure safety.
Now our classes are at 1 class to 18 learners, so the issue of the social distance is quite okay. We also engaged the parents to show them the need for them to support us as regarding the masks. And for sure they came in handy. Each one of them brought 2 masks that were left with the teachers, just in case one of the masks that the runners have may get lost or they may forget to carry from home.
The first reopening offered them invaluable lessons to deal with the management of full capacity population.
We allocated ourselves duties as the teachers. There are those of us who come very early. They are here by 6 a.m. just to make sure that we take the temperatures of every learner and we keep a record. We give that record to the teacher so that the teacher knows this learner is getting into the class at this temperature. Just in case the temperature changes, the teacher is able to advise the people learning the sick bay.
A sick bay has also been established to deal with any eventualities. Water points and a temperature booth has been set up at the main gate. With a population of about 2,000 students, plans to put up tents to ensure social and physical distancing are in progress.
We are trying to level the whole field so that should we feel we need tents, we will be having a place to pitch them. Simply because it's a school that is quite big and the numbers of the learners are close to 2,000. So we cannot take anything for granted.
With these measures, pupils here are yearning for a full resumption of lessons.
I was excited because, I didn't want to repeat my class 8. The reopening, we reopen, then maybe the other schools will reopen on January. I'll do my KCPE on March, so I'm actually excited because I won't repeat my class 8.
I'm actually pretty excited that the schools reopen because it's been a long time since we started learning. It's really great. I was actually pretty tired of being at home. We've learned a lot since schools reopened.
The Hospital Hill picture is almost ideal, but hardly can the same be said for all other schools across the country. The clock is ticking to the scheduled 4th of January full reopening of schools, even as the COVID-19 curve refuses to flatten. It will therefore be a delicate balance between the urge to catch up with the curriculum and the safety of the school community, with the latter bound to hold sway. Caroline Kamar reporting for the NDA Report.